Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silvermont, and this is a starter guide for Warframe, a free-to-play game on PC, PS4 and Xbone that's been running since 2013. There are on the screen timecodes for specific segments and timecode links in the description if you scroll down a little. That's if you want a particular area or just want to skip my intro. Rude. I first tried Warframe in 2014 on my PS4, wherein I played just a few hours, but the majority of my experience has been on PC, and all of the gameplay and details in this video will conform to the PC version. There may be slight differences for consoles, and I've played around 180 hours of Warframe total. Whilst I am far from an expert, I think I can help answer some questions and concerns that new players might have. Warframe is an interesting game, and one of the best free-to-play models I've come across, and yet it can be a little hard to get into, as I rather feel the developers have intentionally left the game rather vague and obtuse at times, with the intent that players will help players, as opposed to spelling everything out with hundreds of tutorials. So I felt compelled to make a video to try and answer some of those questions that I had starting out, and to give some tips that, well, I wish someone had given me. Disclaimer time. Warframe is an ever-changing game, so it's entirely possible that information in this video will eventually be outdated. Plus, as mentioned, I'm far from an expert, there's a lot of stuff I don't know. But if you have any questions not covered in this video, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll get back to you ASAP. And finally, this is the first time, but definitely not the last time, I'll bring up the Warframe wiki, a great tool that has almost all of the information you could possibly want. That out of the way though, let's get started. The Orbiter in Warframe is your base of operations, a spaceship from which you will deploy your launcher to embark on missions. And you could think of your launcher as a dropship or a shuttle. The Orbiter though has many other functions that we'll touch on briefly, and keep in mind that many of these functions will not be there right away, but it won't be long before most of them are unlocked naturally just by playing through the game. First up, there's navigation. This is where you'll view your star chart, your map of the system, and choose which planet and which mission to start up, which area to visit, and so forth. It will also give you other mission related information, such as time limited events going on. The communications area houses information about syndicates and the Conclave. Syndicates are effectively factions you can pledge to at a certain point in the game for rewards. Like in many other online or RPG games, these are factions that you build up a reputation with. As your reputation gets higher, you get better rewards. And the Conclave is just PvP, which I know nothing about. There's also the Codex, an in-game resource that tells you how to unlock quests and contains lore and story content for you to read up on. Finally, the communications area also houses the market, an important place to buy items, but we'll go more into that in the market segment later on. Your Orbiter is also home to the arsenal, where you create loadouts for your Warframe, the mods segment, where you can manage and upgrade mods, and the foundry, where you will craft items. More on that later too. You may find that some doors are locked on your Orbiter initially. These will open in time as the game and story unfold and progress. You can also decorate your Orbiter with items you may find in the world or purchase on the market, purely for cosmetic reasons. The Orbiter is how you will begin your progress, but how do you actually make that progress? Well, I'm glad you asked. One of the big questions that seems to be asked frequently by new players is quite simply, what am I supposed to do? So let's talk about the star chart, the story and progression in Warframe. Here is your star chart, a map of our local system. You will start the game on Earth, and one of your primary methods of progression will be simply completing this star chart. Every time you complete a node on a planet, you will unlock the nodes connected to it. These nodes are made up of one of a number of different game modes, which, again, we'll talk more about later. Typically, at the end of a planet's node chain, you will have a junction node. Completing this junction will allow you to move on to the next planet, and these junctions often have prerequisites besides from unlocking the nodes that connect to it. For example, you may need to craft a certain item, kill a certain enemy, or have completed a specific quest. So let's talk about quests on that note. Unlike the numerous nodes, quests are the more unique content of Warframe. Most node missions are repetitive and could almost be thought of as filler content, whereas quests are more story-driven content. On your character's ship, you'll find the Codex, which lists most of the quests and also tells you how to unlock them. Setting that quest as active then allows you to pursue the objectives from your star chart. Pretty straightforward. There are currently around 25 quests in Warframe at time of writing, but arguably only 3 or 4 of those are what you might consider main story quests, in that they seem to actually advance the plot somewhat and feature cutscenes, etc. This isn't an overly story-rich game despite the lore-rich universe, so that's something to keep in mind going in, if that's what you were looking for. Now, as to the question, what should I be doing? That of course depends on what you want to do, but I think it would be advisable to make completing the star chart one of your priorities. For once you've unlocked every node, you will then be able to stretch out and explore other content at your leisure. It is worth pointing out that you do not have to necessarily complete every node on a planet before moving on to the next one, but completing every node on a planet will allow you to deploy extractors to that planet to, well, extract materials, which we'll touch more on later. My advice would be clear the star chart, just keep working through those nodes and going through the planets and the maps and unlocking and clearing junctions as you go, and once you've done that, start working on the non-vital quests. However, many of the quests will unlock the blueprint requirements towards crafting this or that Warframe, so if there is a particular one that you're after, it may behoove you to do that quest. Mastery rank is another big part of the game's progression. You could think of it as your overall progress gauge. The higher the number, the more hours somebody's put into the game. It will give you a quick way to determine how advanced and experienced a player is at a glance. Certain things are locked or gated behind mastery ranks, such as weapons, fenders, quests, and so forth. By the time you reach mastery rank 15, you will have nothing much gated to you. But how do you gain mastery rank? Primarily by mastering your weapons, by ranking up your equipment. Warframes, weapons and so forth, they all go from rank 1 to rank 30, and once you reach rank 30 you have mastered that item. You will also gain mastery by completing nodes and junctions on the star chart. This is one reason why it is good to always be leveling up something or other. Even if you don't plan on using a weapon, it's worth getting it to max rank simply by using it for the mastery rank progress, and then you can sell the weapon if you don't want to keep it. Each time your overall mastery ranks up, you'll take a test to actually obtain the next rank, which can be done once a day. So if you fail the test, you're going to have to wait 24 hours before you can try again. These tests are usually quite simple, but you can always research them online or even practice them in-game before actually taking them. And you'll benefit in other ways besides from just the unlocks of gated weapons. You'll gain more resource and loadout slots, for example, by ranking up mastery. So it is definitely something you should pay attention to and make somewhat a priority. The market is extremely important in Warframe, and there are two main currencies that you need to concern yourself with: credits and platinum. Credits are the primary in-game currency, which can easily be obtained just by playing the game and selling items that you no longer need. Platinum can only be acquired from buying it with real-world money or by trading with other players, such as selling them an item they want for platinum. You will receive a small gift of platinum at the start of the game, but this cannot be used to trade with other players. It is highly advisable to use this initial free platinum to buy extra inventory slots for your Warframe and your weapons, so that you can have more of them to use and level up. For the most part, platinum in Warframe is not needed to progress. It's a time saver and used for cosmetic items. And even without buying it, you can always focus on selling in-demand items to other players. To that end, the game has a trade chat channel, and there is also a very useful unofficial website called Warframe.market, where you can list all that you are selling for other players to browse at their leisure, and then they can use the website to message you in-game and set up a trade. But let's talk more about the in-game market that you can access on your ship. There is plenty to buy on the market with your credits, primarily in the form of blueprints. Often you will have the choice of buying a Warframe outright with platinum, or the blueprint for that Warframe with credits, so you can construct it yourself once you have all the components. Remember to check through the market now and then to see if there's a weapon or such that you might want to build. If an item isn't available on the market, it might be obtained from clan research, which is another thing we'll touch on a bit later. The market is a very important way to gain mastery rank, as you'll need to master those different items. Warframe doesn't have strictly vertical scaling either. Just because you unlocked a Warframe or weapon 50 hours into the game doesn't necessarily mean it will be stronger than one you got at the start of the game, merely different. And trading with other players is limited by your mastery rank. The higher your mastery rank, the more trades per day you will be able to do. But starting out, you won't need to worry too much about trading. That'll be more to fill in gaps and items you need much later on, that you haven't acquired naturally along the way. Of course, it can be worth checking mods and components that you receive if you don't need them. Rather than selling them for credits or converting them into endo, you might want to check on the Warframe market to see how much they are selling for in platinum, so you can start to build up a little bit. If you do fancy buying some more platinum, one of the most useful things you can spend it on, as mentioned earlier, is Warframe slots and weapons. If you have 2 weapon slots in your inventory, you can only store 2 weapons. Likewise with Warframes. Whilst you could sell the weapon or Warframe to make room for another, that isn't always the best option, especially when we're talking about Warframes, which can be quite costly to make. But you have to consider how much time and resources and effort you put into creating those items. On the plus side, the game has a daily tribute system, wherein every day when you log in, you will receive a random bonus item, and these will sometimes be heavy discounts on in-game platinum purchases. On the PC version at least, these go as high as 75%. So what I did was wait until I had a 75% off voucher, and then I bought a little bit of platinum so I would be able to buy more slots, etc. But even if you don't have money to spend, you will have trading with players to fall back on. Warframe and item slots cost something like 10 or 20 platinum, which isn't very much. You could make that by selling just a couple of mods on the Warframe market to other players. Warframes, or Space Ninjas as some have taken to calling them, the game's titular entities and your main driving force. At time of writing, there are around 35 Warframes in Warframe. So far as I'm aware, every Warframe can use every weapon. Their uniqueness comes from their abilities. By and large, every Warframe has 4 active abilities and 1 passive. That is to say, on the PC version, you have 4 abilities per frame mapped by default 1 through 4. Each Warframe starts unranked and has a max rank of 30. Ranking up will get you more shields, unlock the abilities, and rank up their strength. I won't give a rundown on every frame, but I'll touch on a few of my favourites and some I consider rather archetypal. I began the game with Excalibur, a simple all-rounder who I have fun with because his 4th ability reminds me of Genji's Ryuga Wagga Do the Hokey Pokey in Overwatch. His first ability is a sword dash that can combo between enemies. You press 1, Excalibur will slide forwards and strike an enemy. If another enemy is nearby, he will automatically slide to that one in a combo. His second ability is an area of effect that blinds enemies. His third, a large AoE projectile attack. And his final ability summons a sword of energy that he can use to swipe projectiles and cut enemies to ribbons until he runs out of energy. And if you have a green energy set up like I do, you can pretend it's a Moonlight Greatsword. But What is energy that I keep talking about? Well, by and large, every Warframe has 3 in-game resources: health, shields, and energy. Health is red and does not by default regenerate. Shields are blue and do regenerate. Energy is effectively your MP, your magic points, your mana. It is what you use to cast most of your abilities. Energy can be picked up as a drop from enemies or containers in the world, or restored by certain abilities and items. Same with health. Shields typically just regenerate all by themselves. And there are frames to fit most archetypes. Rhino, Nidus, Inaros and Chroma are all tank frames. Banshee, Ember and Equinox can lay out AoE damage. Gara and Frost can create large defensive bubbles to protect your objective or teammates, and Trinity is a support frame that can restore energy and heal, making her a very popular pick. And of course there are frames like Loki, who can turn invisible, and Limbo, who can stasis freeze enemies in a wide area, which has some niche uses. For the most part, all of the frames are good in their own way, but some seem to have the edge on others. Gara, for example, doesn't seem to hold much in the way of advantages over Frost, who has a very similar kit in some ways. And it is worth pointing out that the in-game descriptions of Warframe abilities can sometimes be confusing, vague, or just not enough to give you an idea of how it actually works. If you have doubts there, the Warframe wiki has great breakdowns on abilities, and it tells you how they actually work, and will suggest tips on specific ones, including which mods might enhance them, or the best ways to utilise them. One frame you might be seeing quite a lot of in this video is Mesa, a gunslinger frame who is one of my personal favourites. Also worth pointing out is the concept of prime frames. These are effectively slightly more powerful versions who have more ornate designs. They might have slightly higher shields, health or armour, and usually an additional polarity or two, which, you guessed it, is something we'll talk about in the mods section. But for the most part, prime variations are largely just cosmetic upgrades. You don't need them to be effective, but if you have one frame who is your favourite and used a lot, it might be worth going for the prime version at some point. These are also obtained in a different manner to normal frames. You get them through relics. Most Warframes are obtained either directly from the market with platinum, with the exception of primes, or you can buy their blueprint from the market, clan dojo, or in some cases get them from quests. Now and then there are Warframes who require a lot of crafting, so if you have a surplus of platinum, it might be a lot more convenient to simply purchase them. Equinox springs to mind, as she requires twice as many components as most other frames. Buying a Warframe with platinum means they come with a pre-installed Orokin reactor, as well as a slot to put that Warframe in. And what is an Orokin reactor? A semi-rare item that you can install into a Warframe to double their mod capacity. As with Warframes, if you purchase a weapon from the market with platinum, it will come pre-installed with an Orokin catalyst, doubling its mod capacity. But if you are only planning on getting the weapon to test it out or use as a way to gain more mastery ranking, you'd be better off grabbing the blueprint with credits. But where to start on the weapons in Warframe? Another question I see brought up quite a lot is, how do I get better weapons? This isn't like, say, Diablo or Borderlands where enemies will drop loads of weapons for you. Instead, you'll typically be crafting weapons infrequently. And as mentioned earlier, there isn't a strict vertical scaling. You can obtain weapons right off the bat that are very good. Their overall strength will largely depend on how you apply mods to them to increase their stats. Weapons are split into 3 main categories though: primary, secondary, and melee. Primary is split up between rifles and shotguns. You will also find bows, sniper rifles, beam weapons. Most of these count as rifles though. As for secondary weapons, you can expect to find pistols, machine pistols, wrist-mounted laser cannons, ninja throwing stars, and so forth, many of which can be wielded akimbo, that is to say, you can acquire versions that involve using 2 dual-wielded in either hand. And as for melee, well, there's a lot of melee weapons. heavy weapons like greatswords, axes and hammers. Then there's katanas, whips, swords, fist weapons, scythes, and so on. At time of writing, one of the most popular melee weapons is the Galatine Prime, a gilded two-handed sword locked behind Mastery rank, but something to keep an eye on if you stumble across any of its components perhaps, and just like frames, you can get primed versions of some weapons. Primed versions are almost always complete upgrades over the original version. It is worth pointing out that even if you don't plan on keeping a weapon around because you like it, you should check before selling it to see if it is required as a crafting component for another weapon. For example, let's say you make the pistol called Bolto, then you get it to rank 30 and you have no more use for it. However, there's another weapon which needs the Bolto as a crafting component before you can make it, so in that case it's worth keeping it. Follow the on-screen link, which is also in the description, for a really handy list of weapons that are needed to create other weapons. Definitely a link worth bookmarking. Here's the thing about weapons though, for the most part you can choose whatever weapon you think is coolest, whatever looks the best on your Warframe, and stick with it. Yes, there is a meta, and yes, some weapons are more popular or better than other weapons, but the strength of a weapon will largely depend on the mods, so don't worry too much about constantly looking for new guns and upgrades. If you get blueprints and the chance to obtain more of them, certainly make them and rank them up to 30 for the mastery, but you don't really need to hunt out specific weapons just to be powerful. Whilst the guns are good, your Warframe's abilities can sometimes carry you very far indeed. As for what I'm using, currently I'm enjoying Soma Prime as the primary weapon, Lex Prime as my secondary, and War as my melee, along with Skindo Prime. And melee weapons also have stance mods, which we'll touch on right now, as a matter of fact. Mods are one of the most important parts of Warframe, and right as we kick this section off, I need to explain the broken mods concept. At the start of the game, you'll be finding broken or damaged mods. These are effectively weaker versions of the mods you'll be using later on, and it is completely safe to get rid of them. You can tell a mod is broken or damaged by looking at its picture, and you'll see that it looks kind of cracked. The reason for their existence is presumably because they have a far lower energy drain cost. What do I mean by that? Well, mods are items that enhance the power of your Warframe, your guns, your companions, and so forth. Let's say your gun has a mod capacity of 30, and you want to put in a mod that will increase its reload speed, and it takes up 10 mod capacity. Broken mods cost less of this capacity, as when starting Warframe out, you won't have much capacity in your mod slots to work with. Mod capacity can be doubled by using Orokin catalysts and reactors, so put them on things you really like, and almost all mods can be ranked up in strength. Let's take that reload mod I mentioned a moment ago. At base rank, it might increase your reload speed by 10%, but at max rank, let's say 3, it would be 50%. This is done by fusing a resource known as Endo into your mods, and paying a few credits as well. Duplicate mods can be sold for either credits or Endo, but I would highly suggest selling them for Endo instead of credits, as it's a harder resource to obtain, and of course you can also trade them with other players for platinum. So if you find a mod that you feel is rare but you either already have or don't want, check how much it is selling for on Warframe Market and maybe you can get a few plat for it. Eventually, you're going to start having a bunch of mods that you've ranked up, but you don't have any more capacity on your Warframe or weapons. What do? That's where polarization comes into play. The simple way to look at it would be that each mod slot on your Warframe or weapon has an affinity in the form of symbols. Let's say your first mod slot has an X on it, and your mod also has an X on it. This means that if you put the X mod in the X slot, it will halve the capacity cost of that mod. Effectively, you just need to match the symbols up, so you will be able to put a lot more mods in. You will also probably notice that a lot of the slots have no little symbols, they have no affinity or polarization. That can be solved. a semi-rare item you will come across now and then known as Former, and Former can be used to reset the rank of your equipment, be it a weapon or warframe, and then add polarization to a slot, or change an existing one to a different type. So let's say you have Excalibur at rank 30, you use a Former and he will go back to rank 0, and then you can change that X polarity into a Y, or you can make one that had no polarity at all into an X or a Y, and so forth. So once you have an idea of the sort of mods you want to be putting on, you can Former if you want, until it's able to accept them all and stay within capacity. Hopefully that made sense. It might sound a bit confusing at first, and it is, but you will quickly get used to the whole idea and how it works. Outside of normal mods, there are Aura mods and Exilus mods. Exilus mods can be attached to any mod slot, but they also have their own dedicated slot, but this dedicated slot needs to be unlocked with an Exilus adapter. So in short, it's a way to get another mod slot on your Warframe. Exilus mods are usually based around mobility or utility, so they aren't a priority most of the time. Aura mods are quite a lot more important. As their name implies, they have an aura or an AoE effect that will stack with other players. On top of that, aura mods will increase your mod capacity. Even if the polarization doesn't match, even if you're putting X into a Y, like putting a square into a round hole, you'll usually be better off putting it in anyway because it does increase your capacity. But matching the slots will make it give you even more capacity. Let's look at perhaps the most popular aura mod right now, Corrosive Projection. This mod will reduce the armor of enemies in missions, and whilst we haven't spoken much about armor yet, trust me when I say that's really good. It will result in a large net increase to DPS and kill times. If one player has Corrosive Projection equipped, that will reduce enemy armor by 30%. If all 4 players have it equipped, that's minus 100% armor. You won't really have to worry about coordinating this with randoms, but it's something to keep in mind. Aside from Corrosive Projection, other popular aura mods are Steel Charge, which increases melee damage, and Energy Siphon, which enables passive energy regen, which is really nice if you don't have Trinity. As for which mods to use? Well, if you search online, you could easily find builds for your current weapon or warframe, but typically it isn't too hard to know what to do. In my case, I am more in favour of boost the strong stats over make up for the small stats. For example, if my warframe has 1000 health and 100 armor, I would prioritize a mod that increased the already large health pool as opposed to making the armor a bit higher. This is because many mods are percentage based, and that is a good rule to keep in mind. Try and increase the biggest stats, because percentages will mean the bigger the stat is to begin with, the more benefit you will get from that sort of mod. But that is just my thinking. Remember how I said a lot of people will ask, how do I get better guns? The short answer is that you sort of don't, you just upgrade the mods, which you can use on multiple weapons after all, and that will vastly increase the strength of your weapons. If I roll into a mission with my Soma Prime at rank 30 but no mods, it's not going to feel very powerful, but if I go in with it completely modded out, it's going to just tear through and annihilate everything. It cannot be stressed enough how much of a difference the mods can make to the overall effectiveness of weapons. The Serration mod for rifles, for example, once fully ranked up, which takes a lot of endo and credits, will give you a damage boost of 165%, and that's from one mod. Unfortunately, sometimes mod descriptions are lacking, as with Warframe abilities, so when in doubt, check the wiki or ask other players. Take the multi-shot mods. What does plus 90% multi-shot mean? If you're just starting out the game, this is a good chance. I mean, you could guess what it means, but you're not really going to be 100% sure, are you? But essentially, plus 90% multi-shot means that your rifle will have a 90% chance to fire a second bullet without spending ammo. That is to say, it will fire 2 bullets at the same time for the cost of 1. Which means there's a 90% chance to do double damage. when you look at it simply. Just off the bat, that's pretty damn good. But then when you imagine how that works on shotguns that already fire multiple pellets or bullets, and then you also consider that each individual bullet has a chance to proc status effects, multi-shot is extremely good, even if the description of literally just multi-shot might not sound that impressive or specific, so definitely keep an eye out for any mods that say multi-shot on them. In short, mods are one of the most important ways of increasing your strength in Warframe. As a personal aside, it's not a mechanic I am overly fond of, as I do find mechanics that just increase the number of things by a percentage a little boring, and the majority of mods are like that. However, you can do some fun and creative things with mods. Most of the game modes are fairly self-explanatory in Warframe, but I'll give them a brief rundown and perhaps some tips. And here are the main ones you will run into. Assassination. Quite a simple concept, these are the boss battles of Warframe. You find a boss in the level, take him down. The bosses often have a chance to drop components for a Warframe or weapon, so you may end up farming some bosses. Thankfully, drop rates are pretty damn high, which is nice. Capture. Similar to Assassination, there will be slightly more powerful enemy in the map who will sprint like a madman for the exit. You just need to kill him and interact with his body, and then you win. Do be warned, however, if you don't pursue him, the enemy can actually escape. I found that out once when I went exploring instead. Defense. One of the more popular game modes, defense involves you defending an objective. Usually this will be a stationary object, but sometimes it will be a person who moves around. Frames like Gara and Frost are great here because they can set up a barrier around the object in question. Defense is usually endless, that is to say, it goes on forever. Every 5 waves you'll have a chance to extract, and the enemies will gradually get stronger and stronger. People farm defense a lot for various reasons, and you'll get a special reward every 5 waves. Excavation. A little bit like defense, you will head to an area and a drill will spawn. You then need to protect the drill until it's finished drilling, at which point you'll gain a rare resource known as cryotic. This mode is endless as well. You can choose to head to extraction once you've had enough or when the enemies are too powerful, and the drill will change location every time. Survival. In this mode, you are placed into a map and simply need to survive for as long as you can, which makes it similar to defense. The main gimmick is that you need to collect life support, which comes in 2 forms. Pods that will spawn in throughout the level that restore 30% life support for 100% total, and mini pods that drop from enemies. This is another endless one which rewards you every 5 minutes, and it's great for farming. But remember, be a team player. The best way to play survival is simply to all bunch up in an area which forces the enemy to come towards you from one direction and then flatten them. Put yourself in a corner, bottleneck the enemies and destroy them. Spreading out causes the enemy spawns to go kind of demented, and you want them all bunched up because when you're killing enemies they have a chance to drop life support, which you obviously want. This is a great mode to bring the Warframe Necros, who can enhance your drops from the enemies to make farming even more efficient. And bringing Equinox is really good as well, because Equinox's AoE slash aura will kill any infested getting close to you. Find a dead end corridor, funnel the enemies in, and sit there for like 30 or 40 minutes until you get bored. Come away with a bazillion items. There are other modes, but some of them are too simple or infrequent to bother talking much about. But something that is definitely worth talking about, alerts. These are time-sensitive missions that will show up in your navigation. Once there, they will remain for an hour or so usually. Sometimes they offer really good rewards, but also greater challenge. Always keep an eye on them. One nice reason to have the star chart unlocked, you won't be missing any alerts because you don't have access to their nodes. Next up we have the Void Relic mechanic. Now and then you'll come across Void Relics whilst playing. To open these, you need to do the missions on the right hand side of the navigation panel. void fissures. These will effectively be normal missions, but enemies will drop a substance which you need to gather 10 of to open the relic. Once the mission is complete, the relic will be open and you'll get the item inside. Each relic has a pool of items it can drop, and if multiple players are in a mission and they all bring relics, you can choose from any of the rewards. Let's say one player opens their relic and it happens to have a desirable item show up as the reward. Everyone can pick that and they'll all get it. And as an added bonus, the player whose relic it was will get a resource known as void traces. These are used to refine relics, which effectively makes it so you have a higher chance to get the rarer items in its loot pool. A popular method of opening relics is to do excavation void fissures, because then you can get cryotic at the same time, plus excavation is endless, so you can open multiple relics as the mission goes on. Defense and survival are both popular as well, but if you join up for one of these 3 endless void fissures, don't try and extract after opening one relic. That defeats the entire purpose of going into an endless mission, where people are probably hoping to open at least 3 or 4 relics. How do you get relics? As a possible reward from many activities, but usually endless missions, defense and survival are the best for that, which is another reason why doing excavation, defense and survival are really good for this. Let's say you're doing excavation, not only are you going to get cryotic, you're also going to get a chance to get more relics from each excavation, on top of opening the relics that you went in there to open in the first place. You will get many very good components and items from relics. This is the primary way to obtain prime warframes and weapons. As a quick aside, primed warframes can also usually be bought with real money, but not platinum. You'll have to buy an expensive bundle usually to get that prime warframe if you don't want to do relics. But even if you don't need or want what you got from your relic, most of the time you can either trade it with other players for platinum, or you can hand it in for ducats, another currency that a rare vendor trades great items for. And for a little talk about mechanics, Warframe has a lot of number crunching going on. For example, enemies have various weaknesses and there are many different elements, including elemental combos. There are 3 main damage types: puncture, slash, and impact. You could liken it to the classic piercing, slashing and blunt damage many RPGs use. Puncture damage is good against armor, slashing damage is good against flesh, impact damage is good against shields. They can also proc status effects, as can elements. Remember how I mentioned how multi-shot being good because every bullet has a chance to proc status effects? As for the elements themselves, we have cold damage, which is effective against strong armor, electric damage for machines, heat damage for flesh, and toxic for weaker armor. And you can also combine those elements. Let's say you have a mod which adds heat damage and then another mod which adds toxic damage. If you put both of them on your weapon, you will get a special combination and make a new element. These elements are blast, corrosive, gas, magnetic, radiation, and viral. I won't go into detail on them here, but once again, the wiki has lots of in-depth information. It's more something you'll need to worry about at higher levels anyway. So what you might want to do in the long run is have a few loadouts for different mission types. If you know you're going to be coming across a lot of corpus enemies in the mission, for example, bring a loadout suited to deal with shields. Despite leaving it this late in the video to speak about, crafting and materials play a very large role in Warframe. Fortunately, it is a lot less painful than some games that involve gathering and crafting in my opinion. There are a dozen different materials spread across Warframe, and usually you'll be more likely to find them on one planet than another. You will also typically not need to worry too much about gathering specific types, just play through the game and you'll find yourself getting plenty. You can also explore levels in depth to get every little cache, but you generally don't need to. There are some resources however that are somewhat rare, and I'll make note of those here. Argon crystals. These can be obtained by alerts or found in void node missions. The important thing to note about argon crystals is that they deteriorate over real time. So if you get some and can use them, you're probably better off doing so, as in a few days, I believe something like 72 hours, they will be gone, even if you're not playing the game, it's real time. Unlike most resources, they will show up large in the corner of your screen when you obtain one to make sure you don't miss it. Orokin cells. Eventually, these will be one of the most in-demand resources you'll be after, used to create Orokin catalysts and reactors, and sometimes needed in large quantities for certain weapons and warframes, usually primed versions, but sometimes normal ones too. You can find them on Saturn, Jupiter, and the Orokin Derelict. My favourite location to farm them would be the survival node Gabi on the planet Ceres. Nitane Extract. For me, this has been the scarcest resource. The only reliable way I've ever found to obtain them is from alerts. There are various websites and Twitter accounts that post alerts, so if you're looking for Nitane Extract, or something else specific from alerts, it could be a good idea to use one of these tools to alert you when the alerts come up. If you are after one of the other specific resources, you can always check the wiki and find out where to get them and one of the preferred methods to obtaining them. Using these, you can craft your new weapons, armour and various other things. Let's say you want to craft the Warframe Ember. You will need the blueprint for Ember first of all. This you can buy from the marketplace for a few thousand credits. Then you'll need the 3 components that make up the blueprint, which you can get by farming a boss on Saturn. Once you have crafted each piece, you can then create the actual Warframe. This is the same method applied to most frames. You can also buy Ember straight up from the marketplace for platinum, which will also come with a slot to put her in and an installed reactor to double mod capacity. Some things can take up to 72 hours to finish crafting, and if there's anything longer, I haven't seen it personally. However, you can rush that with platinum. So if you're impatient or need something right away, you can make it craft instantly by using platinum. 12 hours seems to be the average for weapons and components though, which really isn't too bad. You can find many blueprints for new crafted items on the marketplace, and also in clan dojos. Sometimes enemies will drop blueprints or component plans too. One last thing to note about resources would be the extractors. Once you've cleared every node on a particular planet, you can deploy a resource extractor, which you'll need to build first after buying some blueprints for them. You can also build more than one, then you can send them to a planet to start extracting resources, and then they'll take 4 or 8 hours depending on which extractor you used. Titan extractors will go for the more common resources, distilling extractors will go for the rarer ones. They will sometimes suffer damage during this though. If that happens, you just need to leave them to recover health by themselves before sending them out again. I assume if they reach 0% health they explode, but that's never happened to me. If your extractor is at 100% health when you deploy it, I am positive it cannot be destroyed, no matter where you send it. I would say typically they seem to suffer 20 to 30% damage, roughly. The amount of extractors you can deploy depends on your mastery rank. Warframe's a big game, and judging from the size of this video, whilst primarily just trying to talk about the starting points, that definitely says something. But before we wrap up, there's a few other things I'll briefly touch on. Relays. Think of these as little space stations where you can trade with other players and talk with NPCs, as well as find various NPCs for quests. I believe the main ones are in Mars and Mercury, but these appear to be different per system. For example, from PC they might be on Mars and Mercury, but on PS4 they might be on Jupiter, for example. Syndicates. Think of these as NPC factions that you can join. They are also allies and enemies with other factions. I would advise joining them as soon as you can, mastery rank 3 or so, because then you can start gaining a reputation without even really thinking about it, and then as you rank up, you'll be able to get various goodies from them. Ayatan treasures. Once you find the weird NPC called Maru, she'll give you a weekly mission that takes like 5 minutes and you can solo it, where you can just bounce around through doors before they shut to find sculptures, Ayatan treasures, which you can fuse your Ayatan stars into and then sell to Maru for a lot of endo. Or you can keep them to decorate your orbiter. Ayatan stars, by the way, are a resource that you find now and then in levels. The blue ones are common, the orange ones are rare. clans. Joining a clan then allows you to visit the clan dojo once you've crafted a key in the foundry, which takes a few hours. Clan dojos can have various labs set up, which allow you to research a lot of blueprints you wouldn't have access to otherwise, so it's definitely worth looking for an established clan and trying to join. So, in summary, once you've beaten the first mission in Warframe and got the story rolling, your next job is just to play through a bunch of the planets, clear out the nodes. If you feel like you're missing something in the story, don't worry, it really does just take that long before you reach the next part. And personally, I wouldn't say there's much point in messing around with the open world Plains of Eidolon stuff until you've completed the quest The War Within, but you can always go and check it out earlier if you want to. That about does it though. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions not covered here, ask them in the comments and I'll try and get back to you ASAP. Until next time, take care, have fun, peace out.